Hey everyone, welcome to my channel here on Rumble. I'm hoping that most people know by now that something is very wrong out there. We seem to be in an absolute heinous mess worldwide and also in this province. And some of our institutions have shown that they're not really looking after us. So the battle, I think at this point now, is in the courtroom. And my guest today is one of the men who is leading that charge. But first, before we get to him, I would just like to say that you can always just check out the links in the description to help me to continue to bring these stories that you're not hearing on the news. So any information, any relevant links, please check out the description below. And now, my conversation with Umar Sheikh. So where are we at right now? So you're representing a myriad of employees who have filed lawsuits or want help with what they can do going forward. So how are your work days going? How has this been going for you?
They're long
and
days.
Where are you at?
Well, we do 7 days a week right now, and we've been in this zone for quite some time, and that's all right. I mean, there is not a lot of lawyers out there interested in taking this on. I don't necessarily blame them either. I think that it's an extremely difficult case when you look at some of these precedents that are being set out there. But having said that, there is no other home for this type of case, right? So it's not like you're going to win this in the public eye. You're not going to depolarize an entire segment of the population, 60% or whatever, that think you're crazy, or vice versa. It's going to require the dispassionate judiciary, and it's going to require those decisions. Now, a lot of those decisions need to go up the system. So, we get the initial decisions, but then there are appeals to that. And then, of course, there's the Supreme Court of Canada, which is the ultimate decision maker on those cases. And I think those are going to take time. But I have faith in the system to be able to parse out what is context of perhaps a groupthink or fear that we've been operating under with the economic realities and the long-term harms that are being befallen based on policies predicated on 2 doses, which don't really make a lot of sense, right? When you think about it, if it's 2 doses that are ineffective,
what is the point?
What are we doing?
And I hope that the judicial system can recognize this, because we are relying on them to just look at the facts, to go, okay, here's how this is going. Here are the facts. Does this make sense? In terms of judging a case, I hope that common sense prevails. But it is quite a David and Goliath battle.
It's an uphill battle. I mean, look, we represent clients from all across this country in various sectors, right? So we have
who do you have?
Healthcare, public service, provincial, federal, law enforcement, intelligence, Department of Defense. It just, the list goes on
airlines and bus drivers, and the paramedics, like you mentioned, just all these people that have been affected.
It's a pretty big list. Yeah, it's a pretty big list.
It's a long list of injustice.
Yeah, it's a pretty big list of people who are hurting, and I think that we can talk about, until we're blue in the face, we can talk about one perspective or another on mandates, but just putting all of that aside and trying to be a human being for a moment and being compassionate. It doesn't matter where you fall on this issue. Here you have thousands of people who are bankrupted, who are having trouble making the rent, having trouble buying food, having trouble taking care of their children. These people have been under a tremendous amount of pressure and stress. The stigma, being called white supremacists, being called anti-vaxxers, being immediately labeled as the other, and then relegated to that dustbin of society that says, this is where the garbage shall lie. You can't underestimate what these people have gone through and what they continue to go through.
Hard,
And so I think being a human being, anybody watching this or anybody interested in these cases, I think you can certainly have an argument one way or the other, and there will be arguments on the other side, and I'm expecting heavily other lawyers to make those arguments on the other side. But on the human level, on the Canadian level, is it right that we've done this to these people? And And what can we do? We need the services. We want our economy back on track. We want our airports running. We want the airlines to increase routes. We want all of the same things that every other Canadian wants. And so is there not some way to come together and help these people out at the same time as helping all Canadians out by restoring service levels, at least as best you can,
Yeah.
with the amount of people that you've gotten rid of?
Yes, yeah. It's time for them to move forward and move forward faster and start making these decisions. They're using our tax money. And that's the other thing I was just going to bring up, the government has all our government funds. They have all our tax money at their disposal, which is not very fair. Whereas I know some lawyers are raising money. You're having people like me, independent journalists. We all have to raise money to try to get the truth out, right? But if you're a certain person that works for the government, you have funds at your disposal that come out of our pocket.
Mhm.
Correct or not correct? I mean,
Well, I mean, I think right now you have borrowed funds that come out of our pocket, given the level of debt that we're carrying in this country.
yeah.
But
It's
yes,
not fair,
but it's tax funds.
Yeah, it is tax funds. And so a lot of people are out there raising money. And I tip my hat to the people of British Columbia and of Canada who have stepped up to donate to the causes that they support. I
absolutely.
really tip my hat to them tremendously. Can you tell me a little bit about the karmic fund or retainer? What is that?
Yes. So when we started the firm and we started taking all of these calls and the group started to expand, one of the things that became clear on the mental health side is that people were really, really struggling. They continue to struggle. The retainer hasn't changed people's lives. But what we did was, as we looked at thousands of people, we said, okay, we're going to group you into not-for-profit societies that have commonalities of interest. So the airline sector, Free to Fly, for example, is a not-for-profit society. The BCPS for Freedom is a not-for-profit society, Power Workers' Rights, etc. So all of these are not-for-profit societies. And we said we would represent you. We would sign a retainer with you. But in order for us to do that, you would need to take care of each other. And so that society must establish a hardship fund for its members. So any money that they do have or can fundraise must first go to each other to help out in any ways that are necessary. As we were growing, and this is part of the retainer. I know it's been put online, and people are signing it without my knowledge and sending me the generic version. That doesn't count. I'm not your lawyer if you do that. But the retainer said, and it highlighted there had been 5 suicides in the group. And so those were the groups that we were representing, and we had gotten those calls. So and so had committed suicide, and so was gone. That was extremely difficult to deal with, and so how do you? In my mind, I didn't know how to manage files where clients were in such despair, and really they were to that point.
Yeah.
So we said, perhaps putting in this hardship fund requirement prior to representation will help stabilize these groups, and it seems to be having some impact. Now, the greatest impact that I think that we've been able to have is by bringing all of these people together. And so it's been an honor to be able to do that. And as their numbers grow into thousands and tens of thousands, they have support groups and other groups for each other that they reach out to and help each other. They're now meeting up in certain areas, going and doing their own barbecues because they're not invited to other people's barbecues. And so they're really starting to get a bit of that groove back.
We've talked a little bit about the fact that you do represent employees that have been affected by the mandates who are in a union, who are not in a union. What do you have to do to help the people in the union? You have to go through. Can you tell me?
Well, the union process is fairly limited, right? The union members generally have rights of grievance under their collective agreement, and that's where they would go. They would work with their union. However, when a member feels that the union hasn't represented them, they have rights under the Labor Relations Code, and that is a right of filing a complaint for duty of fair representation. And that just says that the union either acted arbitrarily, discriminatorily, or in some other way failed to represent me in a demonstrable manner. When we're looking at hundreds of members of a particular union, there's thousands of pieces of evidence that would comprise that. And so when that's all put together, it'll be going over to the Labor Relations Board, where that claim will be filed. I believe those hearings are public,
Mm.
and so people will be able to get updates and watch
I
those
think
as
you
we go.
told me you have to file a certain thing. What was it?
It's a Section 12 application. Yeah, it's a duty of fair representation complaint.
Right, because that's what the union is supposed to do. They're supposed to represent all members. Doesn't
Absolutely.
matter if the opinion is popular or not. That's what your union is there for. That's what we paid union dues for, right?
Absolutely.
And the other thing is, okay, we're in the middle of summer. Everybody's trying to get a little R&R, a little,
Yeah.
Sunshine and enjoy it. What I know you're not, a future teller, but what are some of the things you think might happen in the fall?
Yeah. So, the fall is an interesting time window to look at. A lot of things are being pushed to the fall, cases, dates, and it often makes you wonder what will come on. Some of the things we're looking at, we look at, what's happening in Australia in terms of the virus, in terms of their pandemic response. They're seeing a huge increase in influenza as well, which is the flu. And as you know, it's been a couple of years since that's hit British Columbia or Canada, really, since people have had
It
the
just
flu.
seemed to have just disappeared.
Well, people have been taking precautions, but I think all of that will conflate in the fall. I also think that of course you've got these global things that are occurring, whether it be the Ukraine conflict or the global inflation that's occurring, or the housing bubbles that seem to be bursting at the seams, or the healthcare system that seems to be collapsing. All throughout, I think you're seeing some really, really bad indicators for um, for the fall. I don't see mandates necessarily coming back. I don't think they worked last time very well. You see the situation that we're in. I think people have probably moved on from that. 40% or so of Canadians or British Columbians have not received their third dose of the vaccination. That is a pretty strong silent majority of people that haven't decided to get it, and that have their reasons for not getting dose number 3, much less dose number 4 or the new vaccine. And so I think people are looking at those numbers. It'll be difficult to mandate, but at the same time, we're already in a privilege-based society. We already operate under a privilege-based system, whether it's how you drive or do other things. And so in the recent history, we've seen that system established for going into restaurants or going into nightclubs or bars or other discretionary spots. I think you may see a lot more of that. That makes sense because people tend to gravitate towards privilege, the points that we all generate from our credit cards or hotel staying points. All of those are privileges that people acquire. So I think that there will be some level of system to acquire the privileges for the freedoms necessary for you to feel that
But
you're part of it.
can I take issue with the word privilege? Is it a
Sure.
privilege or is it your right to go to a restaurant? It was always
I
my
don't know.
right.
I don't think it's your right to go into a private business. I mean, it's the famous signs that the diners would point to in the 50s. We have the right to refuse service to anyone. So I think there are rights. Look, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
you can't discriminate against people. There are bounds of what you can do. But at the end of the day, if an establishment decided that they were going to be vaccine only or ID card only, and that was sanctioned by the government.
That would be a
that-
very terrifying world to
Well,
live in, but it is their right, I suppose.
I think they'd
Just
be able
as
to do
it was the right of certain restaurants to say, no, I will keep my business open. Thank you very much. I will run my business the way I want. Right?
Well, they got fined, and so they got
And without
they got-
penalty.
yeah,
They should have no
they should
penalty.
have no penalty.
Yeah.
But
If one business can decide to be discriminatory, the next business can decide to run it however they want without penalty. But I would say anybody discriminating should have penalty. I think the world's gone backwards.
yeah, I don't disagree with you on dividing folks and discriminating against one class or the other. I think
Okay.
none of that makes sense.
We don't
in
want to
a-
see that in
well,
the world.
not in a homogenous society that we're trying to create, and we're
Yeah.
all trying to row towards the same objective. So I think that doesn't make a lot of sense. However, I think that there's an inevitability to that. I think that you're seeing a lot more class warfare occurring. You're seeing a lot more division occurring. And so when I'm speaking to clients, they're not being invited to certain functions, they're not going to certain events, they're not meeting with certain people. Still
Oh,
to this day.
wow.
And so if that's still happening to them, and no one's really raising an eyebrow at that, I don't see,
But
I don't see
yeah.
a restaurant standing up for the rights of Canadians. I think they'll probably follow whatever the populace is doing. Right?
Well, I don't know. I hope not. I hope we don't get into this segregating, separating type of thing. I hope we can. And that was very hopeful what you said, where you feel like, okay, these mandates, you're not feeling like they will come back. That's your kind of gut feeling.
I just don't know how they could.
How they could, once we've done away with all this, deleted these apps, these
Well, it's not that. They can bring
passports.
the apps back, but it's 40%. It's a
They don't want
significant
it.
number. 40% have not gotten a third dose. So if you're not convincing them to get the third, I know a lot of today's news is arguing about the fourth dose, but that's predicated on those who have obviously gotten the third.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of people who have not gotten the third dose. They're not jumping over themselves to go and get it. I think that you have to look at that size of that population that's saying no at this stage. Look at the impact you're going to have on the workforce even further, on your service delivery even further, on your tax base even further. And as you look at those impacts, I don't know under what logic you could come back and reinforce those mandates. Now, don't get me wrong, if
They've done crazy things before.
well, if there's an outbreak of Ebola, there'll be all kind. I mean, for sure, I'm sure you'll have all kinds of different things. Or if this virus mutates to something else, you may have mandates. But as we stand now, when you're looking at the current structure of this, and again, it's all about context and time. And this is why predictions are never a good thing. And this is why the government shouldn't have set permanent policy to harm people back in Delta. Right? Things change. And so looking at it now, it doesn't seem like a plausible thing to do. But, I think that I've certainly seen government do many, many incompetent things. And so I wouldn't put it past them.
If people want to learn more about what's going on, I mean, I guess there's people like me. We keep covering the cases, and you have a website people can turn to.
Yeah, we're at shakelegal.com, and we're on Twitter as well.
Oh, okay. So there's some updates.
There's some updates. There's craziness that I post on Twitter. I'm trying to govern myself as best I can. I'm new to this whole social media thing.
Me
it's
too,
not,
a little bit. I'm
it's
not the best
something,
at it. But
yeah, it's not something I was ever planning to do. So I'm not trying to get followers. I'm just trying to cause maximum irritation as best I can. So.
As am I.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and coming in and talking to me. And and thank you to everyone who's watching. And so please like and share and subscribe. That's what I always have to say at the end, because I've said this before. We don't have a TV network. We are the network. So we all help each other. So thanks so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.